So we are right on time. Did you guys enjoy lunch? Was it nice? Nice enough? Your belly's full? Ready to talk about sleeping? Right? This would be the time where you go to bed and have a short nap. All right, I think just a couple last people, and then we'll get started. Cool. Hi. I said something a couple of minutes ago, and I think it's true. These days you mention AI and you get a full room, right? Apparently this room was also full in the morning. It was not about AI, but we're going to go with that. And as I was saying, I do mention bedtime stories, but please do not fall asleep right now. For the next 30 minutes, attention is all you need. This was supposed to be a joke, but this is a very bad joke. Right, so what is this and why are we talking today? There's this principle that AI is going to change the world, and that it's changing companies, and that it's bringing these huge performance improvements, and that you can tell these brilliant stories about how you've gone ahead and implemented AI at your business and you've made billions or millions or whatever it is. Some of those stories are true, others are just that, stories. So the goal of this conversation today is to break down some of these theories, particularly in the context of a very large company that works in very particular industries that have certain characteristics that imply the use of AI to be more moderate, or at least in some principles to be more contained. Critical Software is a company that builds business and mission-critical software. Who here has heard of Critical Software in the past? A lot of people in the room, of course. Critical began in Coimbra right around 1998. And nowadays, the team employs over 1,400 people. So it's quite a large company with some very specific challenges, but that works in very interesting industries like aerospace, automotive, trains, with some very interesting clients as well, like BMW, Airbus, etc., etc. And for a company like Critical Software to be at the wave or at the break point of the wave of technology is, of course, clearly very relevant. But before we go into that, it's very, very important to also mention AI, and specifically generative AI. Right around November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT, as we all know. And in about 5 days, they had already amassed 1 million users. And in about a month, they had broken the record for the fastest growing product in the world with 100 million users. This, of course, is interesting from the perspective of companies, but it's also very interesting for us, humans. Generative AI is unlike what we'd seen before, where we can interact with it, and it seems like there's this other person behind the screen speaking back to us, right? And besides, there's this entire universe of media coverage and news and politics and etc. that's been designed around this technology that brings it even closer to this interesting news that we can touch, that we can speak to, correct? You might remember the article that came about of some lawyers in the US that referenced some citations that ChatGPT had given them and that provided some very wrong results in a very specific context that wasn't ideal. And so for companies, nonetheless, it's all the more exciting to be within AI and to believe in the idea that there's going to be this huge impact in terms of performance and efficiency. There's, of course, lots of media coverage, but there's this one specific figure by Gartner that says that by 2026, over 80% of all companies will have encompassed or touched generative AI in their businesses. What does this mean for us? Should we trust these news? Should we blindly integrate this technology into our workflows? It's not so clear. There's academic research that also points in the other direction, in the direction that believing that this idea of immeasurable performance is perhaps not correct. It even states that the high performers are likely to find a 20% improvement in their existing efficiency, but that those low performers, so the other side of the coin, might find some negative impact of the use of this technology. How interesting is that? And then the idea that we're ourselves those high performers that will be the ones able to embrace this increase in performance is also particularly interesting. Can we in fact believe that? Are we knowledgeable enough of our performance in comparison to our competitors to be able to say that we're the ones who are going to be able to benefit from this increase? Critical Software, of course, wanted to understand this, and so motivated by three main drivers, we decided a while back to go ahead and discover it, to try to understand how generative AI can in fact impact a business like ours. And so, of course, competitive advantage was one of them. Can we remain the leaders in the markets that we work for? We wanted to understand how are our competitors using this technology, embracing it, and how can we do it ourselves? And then efficiency. Of course, we wanted to understand if this was true or not. We wanted to see if we could embrace these tools and these processes, introduce them into our workflows, and benefit from this increase. And finally, developer experience. You've been hearing this all day. You've been hearing this for the past years. Developers enjoy working with generative AI. We have a large team of engineers, so it was, of course, very important for us to also understand this perspective. And from there began two research and development projects about a year ago, so in May 2023, that tried to, from a very high-level perspective, understand where this technology can particularly impact our business at Critical Software, developing that critical software. The first one was AI Assistant. It tried to understand how AI assistants could impact our work, day-to-day lives in terms of managing projects, developing code. It interacted with a bunch of different tools, such as ChatGPT and of course, many other. And it learned quite a few things. It learned, of course, that this was a very enjoyable experience, that people were tending to learn a bit faster from using these technologies, that it built a more fulfilling development environment, so people actually enjoyed to use the tool, and they were benefiting from the use. But it did not touch close home, right? So there was a sense that it was important, there was a sense that it was good, but how does this impact our work as software engineers? And a second project went ahead, second research and development project, Project X. And this project tried to understand the impact of generative AI in the specific activities of the software engineering V-cycle. It began, of course, from the more high-level activities, such as requirements definition, and then it progressed deeper down into the cycle, into the vertex of the cycle itself, into the coding activities, writing tests, developing features, etc. And what it found is that, in fact, the closer you get to the vertex, the more value you start to extract from the use of these tools. Initially, it wasn't clear what the sort of performance increase we would be able to get from this, specifically because these were initial tests. There were no tools specifically available for these use cases. Nowadays, we think of use cases like RAG, of course, that you've been hearing about since this morning, but a few other tools were not available before like they are today. And so to get this understanding was very important for us in order to define how we should scope our efforts. Nevertheless, the benefits and the perception of these benefits was very positive. And so the company decided to invest further, and so came about the AI Shift. The AI Shift is an initiative that's designed to help Critical Software navigate the landscape of generative AI tools and processes, and that intends to promote their usage within the company through structured initiatives in a way that effectively and sustainably promotes those efficiency, those positive efficiency impacts that we were discussing. So it's not so much how can we do something that works very well for now, but that perhaps will be lost for in the future, is how can we impact the organization in a way that remains for the time to come. It's based on two principles. It's, of course, the very technical challenge of building and using these tools, finding ways to communicate them to people. Generative AI is not simple. You've heard, of course, about the hallucinations and all the technical terms that are associated with it. But it's also the organizational challenge of allowing people to embrace the change. Organizational change is inherently difficult. The process of doing something differently than you do today is hard. Of course, you've seen it at your own companies. The introduction of a new client maybe your change to another team, your change of role, the introduction of a new technology. All of these things cost, and the cost is not just financial. It's emotional. It's personal. It's things that are hard for you to do besides your role. And so, in order to better understand how this could be processed at such a large organization with so many intricacies, we had to develop a plan. And so the plan consisted of 3 stages. Initially, we did an analysis. We wanted to understand what sort of capabilities we would need and the ones that were available within critical software in order to make this come true. We analyzed a lot of tools, we did a lot of interviews, and we came to some conclusions. The second step was to do an industry analysis. We had to speak to our competitors. We had to see what they were doing, right? Of course, other companies might have been ahead of us for a little bit in the way that they used the technology, the way that they perceived it. So it was very important to also have this other perspective contained within the framework of our AI shift. And from these 2 initial stages, from conducting over 25 interviews, testing out over 30 tools, and identifying 80 relevant use cases, which for us is a very impactful number, there were 2 things that we understood. And this is where we started to sort of see the potential impact that the technology could have within the organization. Everyone had a use case for generative AI. Everyone we spoke to, from managing directors to people in business development to software engineers, everyone could say, right, I'd love to use this tool in this context to do this, and it would impact my performance by 50%. I would spend 50% less time doing this. But there were other things, particularly concerns. There were 2. I only mentioned one, but there's another. There's this idea that by using the free or whatever version of these softwares, you might be compromising on data privacy. And this is sometimes true. Your data, if you're not paying for something, you are the product, right? So that's the idea. So if you're giving away freely the information that you provide to these chatbots or tools or whatever it is very likely that they'll use it to train the next version of itself, correct? So that was definitely one concern. Everyone that we spoke to understood that there would need to be some boundaries as to which tools or how we would use them. And the second concern, which I think is particularly interesting, is that people were scared of the output. We're scared of the lack of control over the things that these tools give us as answers. We've heard of hallucinations, we've heard of creating false references, but there's other situations where the output might not be as clear as that, where it might not be black or white, where it might be something grayish in the middle. And in an industry that can affect lives and that can have very relevant financial and physical impacts on the clients and the people that use the software that we produce, those issues cannot arise. So that cannot be a scenario, right? And so for us, it evolved to be important from the very beginning. And so with these 2 first steps emerges a third one, which is the tools, which is, in fact, what are we going to do within the AI shift? How is this going to work? And so we built this framework, evidence-based framework, to quickly iterate and test the adoption of these new tools and processes within this very large organization. So by tackling the organizational challenge, we're in some ways also tackling the technical challenge. And to operationalize it, there needs to be some sort of hypothesis. We need to be testing something to know what we're testing. And so we came up with this statement full of unknowns, full of white spaces that we then need to fill out. And the idea is we go step by step, testing out a tool within a very small scope. So, for example, a small team, and then progressing into its adoption with larger teams in different contexts with eventually the same tool or an upgraded model of the same tool. And the goal is to reduce the amount of likelihood of failure, so the risk. We're trying to cut off risk as much as possible by doing this in this standardized processual way. And it's been working quite well so far, at least. Within the AI shift, we've been able to develop around 10 initiatives. The number is growing, so it's not so simple. That go everywhere from small tools that we build in specific contexts to helping out our business development departments in presenting generative artificial intelligence to their clients, understanding how it could work for them, building out research and development projects that might be interesting to forward our organizational understanding of the technology itself, and also an academic think tank that would help us cover the other side of the coin. So as you might have understood, there's a sense of urgency for the AI shift. We need to move fast. We need to do things fast. And that's not always the best way to do it, or the possible way to do it. There's the saying in Portuguese, if you move fast, you don't move well, right? It's something of that nature. And so to help us cover the other side, where we actually need to do some intense research and work in deep tech and come up with solutions that cover the state of the art, or that push forward the state of the art, we need to find ways to do it. And so we're embracing research projects and engaging with research institutions to help us in doing that. So we're, on the one hand, promoting the use of generative AI, but also on the other, trying to understand how we can push it forward. And in terms of the tools and initiatives, they range from all sorts of use cases. There's, on the one side, knowledge retrieval. So how can you facilitate the collection of knowledge from several knowledge bases or information databases? As you might imagine, critical software with so many people working, so many clients and industries, it becomes very hard to keep information structured in one single location. And what happens is that there's a bunch of different databases with information that's very relevant. And if you don't provide an easy way to access this information, well, then it becomes unusable. So you cannot access it, it has no value. So the easier the access to the information, the more value it is able to provide. And generative AI is very good at allowing this easier access. And so that's definitely one of the use cases that we're approaching. But not just that. As with the dimension of the organization, the way that, for example, the IT department or the HR department operates is also very structured. And it operates in a way that many of you will be familiar with, which is the ticket system. If you have any questions concerning whatever, your payments for this month, or some issue with your VPN to connect to your network, you'll open a ticket, wait for a response, and then get back an answer and hopefully solve your issue. But again, with the size of the organization and the way that it's structured, much of this information is already available on knowledge databases. So if we can facilitate the access to this information through a tool that integrates all of these databases and sort of creates a one-stop shop or a one source of truth for all of it, you're going to be reducing the amount of time that these teams spend in answering very simple tickets. So this is obviously a very, well, again, obvious use case for a technology such as this one. With that, I do want to provide you with an example of one of these projects that we're building. So a while back, not sure exactly when, but Critical Software came out with this initiative, the Critical Titans. It's a marketing initiative. The idea is to communicate the values of the company, the way that we work, a little better, and through these personas. So there's 4 Critical Titans. There's Zeta, Ingenu, and then there's Volt, and then there's one last one, which I will not remember. And the goal is each of them have a specific personality, some traits. They're very good at one thing. For example, Zeta is very strong, so she can use her strength to save the world or whatever. Ingenu is very innovative, and so he can use his mind to come up with new ideas and do things differently. You can start to imagine where I'm going with this. It's very simple to start making associations between the information sources that you have available and these characters and these personal traits. And so that's what we did. We're working with the marketing department to come up with a tool that integrates some of the other initiatives that we were already working with, namely these information retrieval tools, and to create this all-encompassing tool that can act as your personal assistant at Critical Software. Let's imagine for once that you're a project manager and you're about to start a project with a client in the automotive industry in, I don't know, France. Let's say it's France. And you're presented with an Excel sheet of over 800 rows of information collected over the past 25 years. Perhaps you're going to do a Command F or a Control F, and you're going to search for automotive. Well, instead of 800, you might get 100 results. Well, then you add another layer on top of that, and you search for France. And then instead of 100, you might get 99, because all of the projects that you did when you're in France. So it's not like this is a solution at the moment. So the same project manager with access to this tool might simply say, hey, Zeta, or in this case, Ingenio, I'm starting this project with this client in the automotive industry. What are some of the lessons that we have learned over the last years that might help me structure this project? And so the tool will return a plan of action to help you out in conducting this activity. But let's look at how it works. So I came up with some sort of demo. It's not live demo because it does contain some specific information that we cannot share. So I've edited it out, but you can trust me, all this is real. It came out this morning from the chat tool. There's some specific characteristics that I think are important to mention. Of course, the marketing and values is connected to the Titans, but then the existing workflows is also part of the challenge, the organizational challenge of change. If we were to introduce, let's say, a new piece of software that you had to install on your computer, or if you had to access a specific website to be able to interact with this information, perhaps, well, not perhaps, but definitely we would be creating a new layer of trouble, a new layer of hardship. By using our existing workflows to allow our coworkers to access this information, we're simplifying it. We're saying, right, you're already here. We know you're here because that's where you communicate with your colleagues. Might as well use it to communicate with the assistant. So that's what we did. We integrated this tool within the Microsoft Teams, which is what we use at Critical. I start off by saying, hey, what can you guys help me with? It returns a very simple answer, and right in this case, I wanted to let's look at lessons learned in innovation. Let's see. Let's speak to Ingenio about this. Hi, Ingenio, and here I'm calling out for the help of a specific assistant. I'll give you an example later where we don't say what specific assistant we want to use, but we do get the information back from the correct one. But in this case, I knew I wanted to speak to Ingenio, and I knew what I wanted to tell him, right? So listen, I've been dealing with this very tough client. We're having the worst time working together. The project was initially going okay, but then we had some shortbacks and there's some delays. Things are effed up. Right, so Ingenio is through this query, he's going to use state-of-the-art generative AI and retrieval procedures to go through the knowledge bases and information data sources that we have available, and he's going to bring back just the information that I need. So he's going to collect specifically the lessons learned that make sense in this case in specific, and he's going to return them to me. And what he says and what he lays out is a very specific plan of actionable insights that I can use, in this case, to help me out with rebuilding this relationship with the client. Information that would have been very hard for me to retrieve should I have proceeded the traditional manner of looking through it in the available data sources. And of course, since information traceability and making sure that we have access to the source of it is very important, all of this is done in a manner that allows us to trace it back to the source. So all information that is processed through this tool is referenced and linked to our initial database so that we can confirm or disprove, might be the case, that it is true and that it relates to what has in fact been registered. This is, of course, related to the potential downfall that I mentioned in the beginning, where people were letting us know that they were very worried about how potentially this technology could lead them to be using false information. And so that's not all. And as I was telling you guys before, there's this idea of using the tool to reduce the amount of time spent by these HR and IT teams. And this is a particularly relevant use case. I can say I've been having a toothache, which in fact I have. I think I need to get my molars taken care of. But I don't remember the health insurance policy number, which is important in my case to communicate with the doctor's office. Instead of going through all of our internet data sources and trying to look for this information, which is not simple, I can simply say, been having a toothache, I need the healthcare information number, can you get it back to me? And the tool happily replies. If you're working in Portugal, one of the specific characteristics of Critical is that we have offices in several places. But if you're working in Portugal, your health insurance policy number is this one, and you can use it with the health insurance provider, which is this one. Right? Of course, blurred it out because you do not need to know that. But in fact, we've reduced the amount of time that it would take for us to receive this information because now we have it basically instantly. And we've also made available a resource that would otherwise be unavailable due to our simple request. Finally, let's see if it can make up for the bad joke that I told in the beginning. Why did the developer go broke? Because he used up all his cash on debugging. I guess not. Apparently AI is not good at joking. Good enough for me. I guess I'll get to keep my job. Cool, but AI at Critical Software is not just that, and it's this entire universe of other things that are happening at the same time. Of course, as you will know, generative AI is a very specific niche of AI and machine learning and data science. The goal is for us within the AI shift to promote it, included in the overall strategy for AI at the organization. And so, besides the 10 initiatives that I mentioned before, there's this overarching category of other things happening at the same time, namely a bunch of other R&D projects that are that have either finished or happening or will happen in the future, concerning topics such as what is the best hardware to run open source models on, for example, or how can we build an interface for people who are not technical to interface with very technical applications. And namely among other, a lot of other things. Of course, this side by side with the AI experts team and the connection to academia, but also the venture capital arm of Critical Software allows us to have a very encompassing approach to artificial intelligence that does not simply stick to generative artificial intelligence. That's one of the key learnings that I wanted you guys to get from this conversation. And as I said in the beginning, our idea is to communicate this or to do this very sustainably. So in order for this knowledge to remain at Critical Software and to be transferred from employee to employee and from organization to employees, it's key that it is very well communicated. And so for that, we're building out this very comprehensive knowledge base and information base where we communicate the tools that we have available, the processes to use them, best practices. One good example of that, for example, is, sorry for the redundancy, is of course prompting strategies. You've used ChatGPT. Perhaps you found ways of using it that are very interesting that your colleagues could benefit from. And I mean just, short paragraphs to get the information that you want out of it. Having a platform where you can share these guidelines or these usages, interesting usages with your colleagues might be a relevant resource for the organization to have. Of course, we don't know how the technology is going to progress into the future, but at least for now and the way that we know it, it does appear to be relevant. But let's look at the statement that makes up the title for this talk. Let's look at this concept. So how did AI improve our performance by 20%? It did not, right? So that's not how it works. The idea that you can get this overall performance increase of whatever specific number it is, that does not exist. The idea that simply by introducing, just look at this. And when you have close to 1,500 employees with tens of different roles in very different industries that differ in their very specific characteristics, how is the introduction of the same tool going to have the same impact everywhere? That does not exist. So what does exist? Well, from one specific initiative, so the introduction of an AI tool that helps our software developers code, we saw that 62% of the 79 people that were taking part in this initiative saw a perceived 27% increase in their productivity. This makes a lot more sense, right? So in this controlled environment, we're laying out the basis of them using this tool through workshops and collective learnings. We saw that they, compared to what they were doing before, they perceived themselves to be 27% more efficient. That makes a lot more sense for us, particularly as an organization, because it helps us make the calculations that we need to then forward these numbers to every other aspect, be it compensation, be it the way that we charge clients, etc., etc. But of course, this single perspective of efficiency is not enough. And as I mentioned in the beginning, developers really do like using generative artificial intelligence. This is a quote that we took off from one of the surveys that we had our people fill out for the duration of this challenge. And if we're having a senior developer, so someone who's not just joined the company last month, someone who's been working for a while, who knows the industry, who's proficient, say that the tool is life-changing in terms of performance, well, then that must mean something, right? And we as an organization cannot simply ignore this statement. So even if the performance impact was not 27%, even if it was 2, 3, 4%, perhaps even a negative impact on performance, of course that's arguable, but even if that was the case, there are other things that we need to consider. And so with this in mind, the AI shift had to communicate this perception to the rest of the company. The intention that we were not just going to look at the specific metrics that output performance of the teams and of the projects in order to have an outlook at the introduction of the technology. And so we released the AI letter of intent, which is very simple and based on 3 principles. The first being efficiency, productivity, and happiness. We are not going to look at the increase in efficiency as the only metric that matters. What we really want is for people to be happy doing what they do. We want to give them the availability to focus on what matters, what truly matters, which sometimes is not the case. And then the second principle is data and privacy. And as you saw in the beginning from the interviews that we did, we certainly identified this to be a key aspect of the shift, of the way that we should transform the organization. And so what we're saying is, let's not let ourselves be blinded by the lights of technology and its advancements, and let's do it carefully. Let's not waste the compound effects of over 25 years of collective knowledge and relationships with clients. Just imagine what happened if next year or in 2 years when GPT-5 was released and we came to find out that the entirety of a code base of one of our critical space projects was available on their data set. What could that matter for us, for our client, and for the developer that was responsible for this? So it's certainly one of the principles that we need to take a particular care with. And then the last one, it's this idea of people and empathy. We could let AI do all of our works. Well, in theory, of course, at least we could use it to help us do all of our work, whatever the role was. But in the use of it responsibly, we've decided that there are certain things that we do not want it to do. Things that require a lot more context than the technology can currently interpret and admit. Let's say, for example, that we're looking at applicants' CVs, that we're looking at their applications to a specific role at the company. This is not to say that we cannot do a basic filtering or that we cannot ask for a recommendation of the tool, but we're never going to be able, or at least we're deciding to not make decisions simply based on its output. There's certain principles that must guide us in the way that we use the technology, especially at this moment where we still don't really understand how it works deep down in its core. But the AI shift comes with a best before date. So there's this principle, right? The to shift. To shift means that there's something before shift. It means that there's something that happens during a shift and something that comes afterwards. That's given. You know, this it's what happens. We cannot expect to be shifting forever. There needs to be a moment where we say, right, we've done what we were supposed to do. Now let's look at what comes next. And so even though we don't know specifically when the AI shift ends. What we do know is how it ends, or at least how it should end. And there's, again, three basic principles that should guide us in this decision. First of all is that the entire team and the organization itself is enabled with generative AI. That we can onboard new team members to the use of these tools and this technology in the way that helps them do their job. And that doesn't specifically forego of one specific of the three main principles that guide us. Of course, happiness, money, and people in this case. And then secondly, this idea of clients and ecosystem. We want to be seen as a reference in the world of artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence. We want to be recognized as that reference. But not just that, because perception is only half of the truth. We want to be able to consistently and sustainably deliver projects that have generative AI requirements within them. So we want to do this in a way that makes sense for the organization. We want to make it count. And then finally, this idea of goals. There's other goals. Of course, the AI shift is very small in comparison to the organization. The AI itself within Critical is a bit larger, but still very small. There's other goals of the organization that exist, that have existed for a while, and that need to be met. And so we even though we have our way of working and we have our own goals, we need to be able to say that we're also working towards these overarching goals of Critical Software as an organization. So this is about it in terms of what I had to bring out. A bit shorter, a bit lighter than most other AI talks that I've seen today. But I would like to open up the space for you guys to ask any questions that you might have, and that we can perhaps further discuss some of the topics that we have approached. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Do you have some examples of which tools or which processes do you measure?
Mm-hmm. In terms of measurement.
No, what? Right?
What in specific? So let's look, for example, at the perhaps not the most relevant in this case, but we'll go there afterwards. If we look at the tools that impact IT and HR departments, I think that could be that one's relatively simple, right? You have an average number of tickets that's created. With the introduction of the tool, how many less or more have to come about? That one is relatively simple. With the other initiatives, things start to become a little more complex, right? When you're trying to measure delivery or failures or faults or whatever it is in the engineering process, there's of course some more traditional metrics that you can use, and then there's other metrics. We've started to approach the other metrics, the ones that we were not calculating yet, which is this perceived performance increase. So how are people feeling the use of the tool? How do they enjoy it? What are the specific activities where they feel the most impact? And then once the initiative starts growing out of those boundaries, we'll look at the more traditional metrics like number of PRs open, number of defects in these PRs, number of bugs, etc., so that we can start tracking the other metrics. Thank you. Anything else? I think there's one in the back.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I want to get your perspective on generative AI as an assistant in developing code.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when you're programming and you have some issues, you want a different way of optimizing your code. What's your perspective on that?
My personal perspective, you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So I joined, so perhaps a bit more context. I joined Critical Software 3 months ago. This was the work of the past 3 months. Does change things a little bit. But personally, I've been using generative AI since before ChatGPT was a thing, when you could only access OpenAI APIs through their playground. And since then, so before GitHub Copilot was a thing either, it already had an impact in the way that I code. I'm a designer so I did my bachelor's degree in design, then I did a master's in business, but between then I worked in software development, so I code a lot, even to this day. Most of the tools that were built, we coded them ourselves in the AI shift. So I saw the growth from you having to prompt the tool to get the best outcome in terms of code to now having this IDE integrated tool that you can chat with or that can automatically complete your method or your line or whatever it is. I don't think I could code anymore without it, to be honest. The way that it has changed, even the way that I think about coding is truly remarkable. I think one of the biggest differences is perhaps the way that I overcome an issue, a bug that I found in my code. In the before years, you would go to Stack Overflow or one of the other platforms that were available. Nowadays, it's very rare that I have to leave my IDE to find a solution. In terms of optimizing code, as you were suggesting, I don't think that's perhaps the best use case for a tool like this. And I'll back this up with some information that we've collected. The most striking metric that we've got from the developers that are using these AI coding assistants is in terms of repetitive tasks. Over 82% of them say that they have found very, very relevant performance increases in relevant tasks. And I do believe that that's perhaps one of the main benefits. Let's say you're writing unit tests for functions that are relatively similar or simple enough. You do the first one, and then the tool can automatically do the rest of them for you. And then, of course, you have to go back and check the work and make sure that it makes sense. But typically, I don't want to use the word smart, but it's smart enough to understand what you meant with it. So, yeah, I think I've got a good case to say that it is particularly relevant in coding. Thank you for the question. Any other? Perhaps one last to close? Go ahead.
In your AI assistants, you're giving access to the private documentation. How do you control the private access from some people to other documents that they don't need to have access to?
Yep. There's two sorts of information access that we have at the moment. There's which reflects the sort of information access that we have at Critical Software. There's certain platforms that everyone can access. For example, the intranet that we have, which has the information on the HR department, for instance, everyone can access it the same way. In terms of private documents, there's through the use of the authentication methods that we currently have available through our provider, we can simplify this process. But it's certainly something that you have to keep in mind. It's more about integrating the tools in a way that makes sense, other than creating tools that mimic this behavior side by side. I think I'll give some more detail on how this works. There's perhaps two ways of having this information retrieved. In the morning, I don't know if everyone was there, but there was a very interesting talk on vector databases and RAG. So that's definitely a possibility. That's not a traditional database. So typically, for you to have vector types of information stored, you need to have a specific database as well. And so in those situations where we do want to do vector search, we tend to create a new instance of a database with information synced to the first, and then we do the semantic search and all that beautiful things on that. And then we return and we interpret that with the LLM. On more traditional types of information, typically the search engines already do a good enough job. And so in that case, there's no need to do a new database or to copy it into another structure. We can use an API to call whatever information we need, feed that into the LLM, and then return a good enough result in a specific context. And in that case, there's no issues with authentication. What the assistant that's talking to the user sees is only the information that the user could see. Issue solved. Thanks for the question. Anything else? Of course, I'm happy to discuss any other topics that you might like. My email is right there. Feel free to reach out. It was great speaking to you. I hope you have a good rest of the convention. And of course, thanks.